Nick, Dale, thank you so much for joining the podcast. How are you guys doing?
We're good. We're really excited to be here. Big
Yeah.
fans of your podcast. So,
Thanks for having us.
yeah.
No, no worries, no worries. Yeah. So, yeah, obviously I've followed you guys for a while. I think I reached out to you a while ago, and we kind of talked about doing something, and then yeah, I think life gets in the way. So, yeah, super happy for you guys to be on now. You guys are, a voice in the space. So, yeah, super excited to find out more about your guys' story. So, what I normally do is it's normally with one person. So, like, my lack of multitasking is gonna be like difficult here to deal with two different stories, but I like to go back before kind of any sort of like chronic health issues like occurred, particularly I guess the intense part of the stories, and just understand what life was like before then, and then I guess just understand a little bit about kind of how things started to unfold as symptoms start to arise, that kind of thing. So I don't know who wants to go first and kind of how you guys want to weave in the story, but we'll do it, as we said, like very organically.
Yeah, something unique about us is, of course, we both have our own sub experiences from what we went through, but we largely, in terms of the story, went through it together. So there will be nuances of each of our different journeys, but a lot of the facts of what happened, happened to the two of us. So that might make it a little bit simpler for your audience to
So
follow.
much easier. So much easier. You guys
Yeah.
knew you were going to be doing a podcast episode, and you thought you'd just do it together.
Yeah, there you go. But Del, do you want to
I can
put the
set the
picture?
stage, sure, and then you can kind of take over. So in terms of like before our health issues started, Nicole and I had just graduated from college. We were well on our way starting really competitive corporate jobs, and we moved into this apartment together with two other sorority sisters. We were so excited about this apartment. Finding a 4-bed, 4-bath in West LA is like unheard of. And we found one. We were like, this is a unicorn. Oh my God. Like, we're so lucky. We're going to lock this in as fast as possible. And, overall health wise, we both felt good. We were like so excited to start our post grad life and our careers. And we were excited about our living situation. So we all moved into this place together, and soon enough, health issues started to develop, and I'll let you jump in.
Yeah, it all started to unravel. We were healthy. We had just graduated from college. Health was never anything that held us back from. And within, I'd say, 3 months of moving into this apartment, we all started to have very mysterious symptoms. And the only symptoms that were uniform across all of us was gastrointestinal issues that none of us had dealt with before. But separate to that, we each had our own separate symptoms. So like for Delaney, she was having horrible insomnia where she literally wasn't sleeping for weeks. For me, it was the opposite. I could sleep for like 15 hours and then wake up and feel like I slept for 5 minutes. We had really bad brain fog and fatigue and the GI issues, and we just didn't feel like ourselves. But because we were these like high achieving adults who just graduated from, a really world-class institution and got these jobs that were really hard to get and competitive, we kind of just chalked it off as, oh, we're, adjusting to this new life and we're just stressed and it's a transition period. And we blame that for a lot of the symptoms. And then about 8 months into living in this apartment, I got home from work one day and I noticed that there was a little bit of like a puddle on the ground. And I looked up at the ceiling and there was no water coming. I checked the water sources and there was no water. There was no leak or anything. But when I stepped on the floorboards where that water was, I noticed all of a sudden water coming up from the floorboards. So this was the big aha moment. And long story short, we discovered that it was not just stress from these new careers that was causing all these symptoms. It was actually that we were being poisoned by black mold that was hiding behind the walls and under the floors of the environment.
So how much did you know about mold at that point? Like because when it took me a long time to understand that like mold was like a thing. Like I didn't like realize, and I was in the middle of living in an incredibly moldy place that I owned, unfortunately. So did you realize immediately, oh, this is it? Were you had like prior knowledge of it, or did you have to like do your research then?
We didn't have that much knowledge about mold at all before this experience. And then once we realized what was going on, we really dug into the research and started finding a lot about mold toxicity and the chronic inflammatory response, and started digging into that. In a way, I feel like that flooding, like the silver lining of that flooding, is it obviously alerted us to, oh my God, there's active water intrusion in here. Like, we have to look into this. Mold could be an issue. Whereas I do feel like, unfortunately, for a lot of people, it's so much more insidious and they never end up finding the water intrusion, but there is indeed mold behind the floorboards or behind the walls. So in that sense, that was like a blessing in disguise. So at that point, we started researching it.
There was a period of denial, though, where we were like, "Oh, we could
downplaying
fix it. Yeah,
and
it's fixable. Remove those floors and put in new ones, and we'll be fine." But that's couldn't be further from the truth of what the actual situation was.
And I think it also became clear to us, like, it was a systemic issue. It was quite severe in this environment. It wasn't just isolated to, like, in an ideal scenario, oh, maybe there was like a leak under a sink and it's a problem, but like it can be addressed and remediated and then you're good. This was like, no, this is way too systemic and severe, and it's probably not going to be remediated properly. So let's get out. And we did realize pretty quickly, like, we need to get out if we're going to heal. So we all moved out, and then we found practitioners. And that was a whole journey in and of itself.
Yeah.
Which we can get into, obviously.
Yeah. So I'm just curious about the other two people you were living with. Did they have as severe as, like, symptoms as severe as you guys? And how were you like dealing? It's just so crazy you were going through it together in a way that's kind of like worrying, but then also quite comforting in like a weird, messed up way, that you could kind of like share it together. But like, was what they were going through as intense as what you were going through, and kind of how did that affect all of your guys' relationships as well?
Yeah, so the unique thing about mold, I think, is not well understood by most of the population, is that there's two different reactions to it. There is more of an allergic reaction, which is what people typically think is a mold response, which would be things like asthma, respiratory issues, stuff like that. For those people, when you get removed from the environment, a lot of the times you start to get better a lot quicker. Then there's the second bucket of people, which about 35% of the population, we think the stat is higher, but about 35% of the population have genes that make them susceptible to mold. This is a mold toxicity response. And so your body doesn't have the ability to flag the mold toxins. So instead they get stored in your body and they accumulate, which is what leads to it being so many symptoms across your whole system. And so for Dell and I, we fall into that camp, whereas our other roommates had more of a allergic reaction type response. And so when they were removed from the environment, they got better a lot quicker. For Delaney and I, unfortunately, that was not the case. But we all did have certain reactions. They just differed in their severity, and they differed in how long they lasted.
Yeah. And I think what happened to us, it's honestly like a perfect microcosm for what so many people deal with when they come into contact with mold exposure. It's very common to have a family, and every person in that family has different reactions. So you could have two people that are super sick, one person that maybe has mild allergy symptoms, and one person that has no symptoms. And that actually can create conflict within the family too, because certain people don't fully buy into or believe that you're suffering because they're not suffering. But part of it is this genetic component. And then we also always say, of course, genes play a factor, but it's the environment is moldy enough, it's most likely going to make whoever is living in it sick.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I guess if you're the type of person where your nervous system is on, fight or flight, or and it's not like it's dysregulated, then you're going to be far more like open to being like hit in a big way. And it sounds like if you guys were the high achievers, like pushing yourselves, like how much do you think that played a part in you guys being more open to it, do you think?
I think it plays a big role. That's something that has been really interesting to sort of learn about after the fact. And, we are now functional medicine practitioners, so we see our own clients, and it's very common that the client is falling into the bucket of type A, perfectionist, super driven, ran their system into the ground a little bit. And so it's been interesting. I'll speak for myself. I don't want to speak for Nicole. For me to look back, mold was the trigger for everything. There's no doubt about that. But I do think, there are qualities that I have that probably to an extent were dysregulating at the time, which didn't help me out at all once I was being exposed to huge amounts of toxic mold.
Mhm.
Yeah,
for sure.
And so let's I've definitely got some more questions around that because I think it's really interesting. But so you mentioned about practitioners. Did you? I don't know what kind of like background are you from? Like from me, it was like, okay, I just need to go to the doctor. He'll give me a pill. He'll give me some treatment. I'll get better. Was it like that, or did you realize like pretty quickly you needed to go more of an alternative route?
It's kind of a mix, but the one thing that we definitely leaned into was the more aggressive, the better. That was our mindset. Like the more aggressive, the quicker we'll heal. And that probably got in the way of our healing more than anything. Again, type A perfectionist mindset.
We were like, we need to be better in 6 months.
Yeah.
So is that cool?
Yeah. And we put a lot of pressure on our healing in that way. And because of these timelines, and also we were willing to, do whatever it took, from taking 130 capsules of supplements a day to spending so much money in medical debt. It's sickening. We really were willing to do whatever we had to do to get better, not realizing that none of those things were going to get us better. But yeah, we saw a lot of practitioners. We went down, in the space of mold toxicity, there actually is this Western path you could go down, which is like the CIRS, the chronic inflammatory response syndrome, Dr. Richie Shoemaker path of healing. It's, a multi-stepped protocol. So we did go down that path. I think that was one of the practitioners we left probably the soonest.
Yeah.
But we tried really hard with some more aggressive pharmaceuticals on that path. And then we went down the more functional path.
Functional-ish.
Yeah, ish. Definitely ish. Of trying to get a diagnosis for all the things that might be wrong with us, and getting a laundry list of things from Lyme disease to viral infections. And, it literally could go on and on of what we were diagnosed with from this practitioner, and all the money and treatments that we tried to get better. So we went down that path hard for a lot of years.
And because I think that's what everyone who comes on this show, like me included, like you end up getting this list, and it's like in some ways it's really comforting because you're like, it's validating. Oh yeah, this is why I feel like shit. But then in another way, it's like, oh my God, how am I ever going to recover from this? There's just so much. And then you go down the Lyme route, you go down the parasite route, and it's like, how can I, like, it's like spinning like whack-a-mole type situation. How did you feel when you had all of these? Was it a mix of that, a mix of validation, but then a mix of overwhelm?
For sure. I think you articulated that so perfectly. And I think the troubling thing about that is that it's really easy to over-identify with a diagnosis, so much so that you're just like really identifying as a sick person, and the impact on that on your nervous system cannot be understated. And it took a while for us to really realize that and unravel all of that and really step away from some of those, Lyme, et cetera, diagnoses that we later realized just did not resonate.
Mm. And so what did start to resonate? I've got my own theory for me, like what started to kind of like move the needle, but for you guys, what was it like that started to click? And could you, in terms of like timelines, where were we at? So you kind of, we're in this place, you moved out, how long? Yeah, could you just talk us a little bit about kind of like timelines as well?
Yeah, so we moved out. We probably saw like that Shoemaker type practitioner for about 6 months.
Yeah.
And then we started seeing a Lyme literate physician, and we probably saw her and another doctor in her practice for 3-4 years.
Yeah.
But I'd say that for me, this is where our paths kind of differed a little bit. For me, I tried the like advanced treatment route, everything from IV antibiotics to IV glutathione pushes, all of those treatments. I was getting IVs like 3 times a week in the doctor's office. I was running so much medical debt. Yeah.
Stem cells,
all of that. And I did that for about a year. And then I paused. I ran out of money. That was a big motivator. And I also paused and said, okay, for every step forward I'm taking, I'm then taking 10 steps back. So nothing is sticking. And I think because I ran out of the money to keep spending, I was forced to really look at the landscape and identify like who's gotten better. And in my mind, the only person that had gotten better was somebody who went down the bee venom therapy route. So I started to explore that. And I spent about a year like preparing my body and getting the education I needed to do bee venom therapy. And I started doing it. And within the first 3 months, I was seeing probably 30% symptom improvement, and it was sticking. So I continued on that path. I would still do various treatment protocols in terms of supplements and very irregular like glutathione pushes and whatnot. But for the most part, I leaned into bee venom therapy fully. I didn't care. This is where I also disconnected from the identity piece. I didn't care what the bee venom was going after, whether that's Lyme and Lyme co-infections, or that's a virus, or that's an autoimmunity. I don't care, but it's going to go after whatever still needs to be tackled. And I really believed in that and leaned into that. And that's what I think got me healed the most, that and nervous system work.
Wow. I definitely got some questions around bee.
Yeah.
Because that's something I've tried hell of a lot, stem cells, or, you know, all those kinds of other things you were talking about. But bee venom was one of those things I looked at, and it was like, I think it was at the point where I was just like, I need to stop spending all my money on all these like, I was gonna say crazy things, but it's obviously, you know, worked out well for you. Actually, maybe let's just stay on that because I think it's interesting. What's the theory behind that? Like, and what is it actually doing to you, or for you?
Yeah. So bee venom itself is antiviral, antiparasitic, antimicrobial, immune boosting. So it's going to be both killing and supporting at the same time. Mm-hmm. And that really resonated with me because I'd gotten all these diagnoses. I had lab tests that showed that things were elevated. Whether or not I believed they were the cause of my symptoms, I really didn't care, but I knew the venom was going to go after that. And so I just ran with it. I had to be extremely committed because the first month of bee venom is pretty brutal. Your body is having like a very overwhelming histamine reaction and die off. And so as you're adjusting to the venom, you need to be very like patient and understanding of that. And so because I went into it knowing that that's what the first month would look like, I was able to get through it pretty easily. And then I stayed on that path for just over 2 years. But within, I'd say, the first 5 months, it was obvious to me that it was the right choice because I was seeing so much improvement.
And you mentioned nervous system work. At what point did that start to come into like your thinking, and how did you incorporate that? What kind of things were you doing?
Yeah, so that was pretty in sync with bee venom. Because I did bee venom therapy with other people. Like I was in a program, I was learning about it with other people. Nervous system work was something that was taught there. And that was probably the first time I even was exposed to it, which is crazy because of how impactful it is for both of us on our journeys. I wish we knew more about nervous system work earlier on. But nervous system work looks totally different for the two of us. For me, it was actually doing a lot of work with animals. Getting involved with horses again. They're like one of the most nervous system regulating beings on the planet. And so that regular working with them almost every single day was like the biggest nervous system piece for me. And then also doing the work to like not have that chronic illness identity and to start to flag things that would come to my mind and reorient them to something more positive. That was a big piece of it as well, but that probably goes down more of like a therapy route, and accessing nervous system that way.
I love hearing like, I haven't heard like someone working with animals and stuff like that, but I love hearing stuff like that because it just shows that there's not just one thing you can do, and it's different for different people, and what soothes your nervous system and gets you more in alignment is totally different to me and other people. And I think that hopefully can be really comforting to people listening. It definitely is for me when I hear that, because I'm like, okay, just because I'm doing this thing and I'm not doing, you know, DNRS or something like that, you know, it doesn't mean that I can't recover. And so yeah, that's that's really cool. That do you find that as well, particularly working with clients? There's like you don't say, oh, just do DNRS on their rounds or whatever it might be.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to find the thing that resonates with you. And when you find it and you see the improvements, it will click and it will be clear.
Yeah,
For sure.
definitely. Let's switch.
Yeah.
What's been going on with you, Dale? You, um, so at the point where you guys kind of, and how, out of interest, how are your guys like, not like relationship at this point? Were you guys still living together? Were you like talking to each other about your different things, and kind of how did it affect things like doing different treatments?
Yeah, I mean, we had moved in with our boyfriends who are now our husbands. So we weren't living together anymore, but I mean, we were along for the ride every step of the journey, the two of us. I mean, when we both went down the advanced treatment path, so we were in that office together doing stem cells, ozone, et cetera, calling each other on the daily, talking about, what we were struggling with. So we really helped each other through the trenches of everything. And then, yeah, I think then that's sort of when your journey veers off into be venom therapy is also sort of where my journey veers off into what really helped me. Which I think nervous system is absolutely paramount. I would sort of categorize it for me as detoxification, gut healing, and nervous system work, as like the three pillars that really moved the needle for me. So healing my gut and a bunch of different issues that were showing up on there, everything from candida to parasites to overgrowth. That helped a lot. Optimizing my thyroid helped a lot. We were both diagnosed with hypothyroidism after the mold exposure, which is super common in mold toxicity clients. I think one thing I want to touch on, because Nicole and I always emphasize this on podcasts, on our Instagram. One thing where I think we both agree, we wish we would have spent more time before jumping into more aggressive protocols or even killing protocols for that matter, is we both wish we spent more time opening up our detox pathways. Just doing everything from sauna to dry brushing to supplements that boost detoxification. We didn't really have a practitioner that was emphasizing that, how important that is, and that if you spend enough time opening up your detox pathways, it's going to make the rest of your journey smoother and easier. We just kind of like jumped right in to everything aggressive, and that's part of why we felt so crappy when we went on all of these protocols. But to jump back into like what moved the needle for me: gut healing, thyroid optimization, opening up my detox pathways. And then I finally discovered nervous system work like 2 years ago. And then that in and of itself was its own journey with trial and error, as it is with everything. Because it's not one size fits all, as we were just touching on. So oh God, this was really back in the day now. And you remember, I tried DNRS.
That was so painful for me.
It was so painful for us because with DNRS, they're so strict and stringent about everything. So I was like, I can't talk to you. I can't talk to you anymore. Can't talk to you about.
Literally cut me off at like my most vulnerable moment.
Whoa.
And she like took away my safety. It's like taking a pacifier away from an infant. That's what Delaney did to me with DNRS.
I was like, I'm not allowed to talk about this anymore. I'm not allowed. I'm breaking the rules. So that ended up not being a match for me at all. I mean, I'm already lean towards being perfectionistic and type A. And this whole system was so just based on like rules. And if you mess up once, you're screwed. And it was not good for my mental health. So I tried that for a bit, gave up on it. I was like, this doesn't resonate with me. Then I found the Gupta program, which I would say is a more gentle and compassionate version of DNRS. It is still brain training in nature. And I committed to that like hardcore for a full year. And I saw improvements, not in physical symptoms, but I saw improvements in my mental health and in my anxiety. So I'm not going to completely discount brain training like for me, because I think it got me out of negative thought loops about my symptoms. what it really actually brought a lot of awareness about how much I was thinking about my symptoms, because they're essentially training you to like stop yourself every time you start fixating on a symptom. And I will never forget when I first started, I looked like a crazy person. I was like, stop, like saying stop like 100 times a day, because these thought loops were obsessive, and they were like ingrained into my nervous system because I had been struggling with chronic illness at that point for 4 years. So it did help me get out of those thought loops, and it helped with my mental health, but it didn't help with physical symptoms. What really moved the needle for me was a program called Smart Body, Smart Mind by Irene Lyon.
Mm.
I don't know if you're familiar. I feel like maybe
I've heard. I think I've read a book. Has she got a book? I definitely know the name Irene Lyon. But yeah. But please give more information. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to even think if maybe I heard about it on your podcast. Will say I feel like there were a couple different things in the universe that were pinging me towards, you need to look into nervous system work. You need to look into nervous system work. And I think your podcast was one of those things. But she's incredible. She is brilliant. She's been like a somatic experiencing practitioner for decades. So she actually has very legitimate credentials and experience. And it was just the first program where the second I dug into it and I started learning about it, I knew on like a visceral cellular level, this is what I've been missing. It was like, oh my God, thank God I finally found the thing that's going to help me. And sure enough, it was not an overnight thing. These things do take time and consistency, but within probably 4 months of doing the work, I finally started to see a huge shift in physical symptoms. So I would say like detox got me a little better. Gut healing got me a little better. Thyroid optimization got me a little better. And then that nervous system work, it filled that void for me, and it got me to sort of a new level of healing.
I just love the fact that you said when you did Gupta, you went hardcore for a year. I was like, yeah, I was like, that's probably the pretty like you're like type A personality, like at its thing. I'm gonna go hardcore on this nervous system work.
I know, which is like ironic that you even talk about it like that, because nervous system work is so intuitive and gentle. And
but everything you guys have said about the perfect, because I was actually on an episode of I can't remember who it was. And over the course of that episode, I don't see myself as a perfectionist, like in some ways, I'm like very disorganized and stuff like that. But around healing, I'm definitely a perfectionist for sure. And it's like those rounds just really mess with my head. Like I didn't do DNRS, I tried Gupta, and it just made me feel like if I don't do this one thing, like if I take a step more than they're telling me to in the round, is that wrong? And it's just like starts to really mess with your head. And I think the things that actually made you just feel like, just relaxed you in the, didn't stress you out. And that they were the things that moved the needle for me on that particular program. What kind of, you mentioned somatic work. What kind of things are you doing throughout that program?
Yeah. So it's funny because this is something I'm always trying to talk more about on our Instagram, but the work itself and the exercises that you're doing are very difficult to put into words. The way that you're working with your body, it is not like any traditional form of breath work, or like there's nothing I can compare it to. So I have sometimes a hard time articulating it, but you're essentially doing these different exercises that allow you to tap into and tune into, honestly, like the intelligence of your own body, so that you can create more capacity and flow in your nervous system, so that your nervous system can slowly and safely start releasing stored trauma, and move out of dysregulation, essentially. One of the most foundational practices that I do mention a lot on our account is orienting. So that's just like the example I'll give, because it's one of the most foundational tools. And that is like literally orienting to your external environment. So, you're feeling your butt on the chair and you're engaging with the environment with all your senses. So visually, you're taking in the sounds. It sounds so subtle and simple, and it is, but the effects when you do it consistently over time, it's one of the most regulating things that you can do for your nervous system. So like that's something I do every single day. And then the other thing I wanted to say, and you kind of prompted this, I feel like it's so important to follow your intuition when it comes to these things, not only with nervous system work, but you could honestly say with anything when it comes to working with a certain practitioner or a certain protocol. Like, obviously you want to give whatever it is a good shot, and you want to give it time, and you want to give it a try. But I think it's also really important to know when something isn't working and something isn't resonating. Like, our gut instinct is there for a reason. That's really what led me to stop Gupta after a full year. I was like, I've put so much into this. I should be seeing more results at this point, and I'm just not seeing them. And thank God I made that decision for myself, because within a couple of months, I found the next thing that was the thing that was missing. And especially when it comes to nervous system work, and someone said this, and I don't remember who it was, but it really resonated. Like, it should feel like a lock going into a key. So like we had similar experiences with brain training. It never felt like that. It felt like a pain. I never wanted to do it. I dreaded doing it every day, doing the rounds. I was like, this doesn't feel like it's working. This doesn't feel like it's resonating. And then with this work in Smart Body, Smart Mind, it doesn't feel like I look forward to doing some of the exercises, like not every day, but of course, like overall, I look forward to doing them, and it resonates on like a guttural level.
Why do you guys think that for people who are trying to recover, maybe at the beginning of their journey, why do you think that? Well, I'm assuming you see this online and people maybe you work with. Why do you think like mention of like nervous system work is so triggering to people? And I don't know if you probably won't have seen it. We're releasing an episode like soon with Marina Diamandis. She's like quite a famous female singing artist. And so putting that out there, I got the mainstream people that never would normally look at my profile, and they were so triggered by this talk of like nervous system work, because it implies that maybe something's in your head and stuff like that. Do you guys see that, and like do you get like a bit of backlash on your profile and stuff when you start talking about that, and people like they just want more validation that it's it's something physical, it's nothing to do with your mind and your nervous system, if that makes sense?
I think we've just been so primed as a society that, you have an issue, you go to the doctor, they give you a pill, you get better. And I think that is, I don't want to call it the easy way out, but that is the more accepted version of how things go when healing from anything. And there's a lot of problems with Western medicine. I'd say that's probably at the front of it, is that it's very much there's a pill to solve this problem. And so when you actually question what the root cause of a problem is, and especially in areas where there might not be as much Western type proof of it,
right?
I think people have a really hard time accepting it. And that's why even more so you have to trust your gut there.
Yeah.
Because if I listened to the backlash that I would have gotten about bee venom therapy, and that I did get, especially from everyone who's like vegan following us and going after me for killing honeybees, then I would not be where I am today. But I had that gut reaction that this was the right thing. But yeah, I think it comes down to the way that we've been programmed as a society, and also not wanting to do the work. Like, this is hard work. Putting in the work to address the traumas, like both traumas you've been through, but also generational traumas that may have been passed down to you. Putting in the work to address those things is really hard. And it's not a quick fix. It's something you need to be committed to, really as a practice lifelong, I think. But to do that work, it's hard, and it's not black and white. And I think that's where a lot of the toxicity around it comes from.
Yeah, I so agree with everything you just said. And I will also say, like, for me personally, that was why it took me so long to get into nervous system work, because I just kept putting it off, because I was like, no, it's not that. No, it's not that. No, this is a physical issue, and it has a physical protocol, and that's what's going to heal me. And then, when you're whatever 5 years in and none of them are working, at that point you're like, okay, I guess I have to look into this. Like, I don't have a choice. So you almost get pushed into it. And I think the reason we don't find much like criticism about nervous system work on our page is a lot of people that follow us have hit that point where they've done a lot. So they're like, oh my God, no, tell me everything about nervous system work. Like, this is what I need. But I think everyone has their own journey to like getting there. And it can take a while to get there because your symptoms are very physical in nature. So it's logical to think that doesn't make sense. How could that be my nervous system? That has to be an infection or this or that or this or that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's and I think probably that's why I never really see it on my Instagram or every now and then in YouTube comments. But because people are just already at that point, they're already so desperate and they're kind of like ready to believe it. But it does take a while. I remember it's the same. I think I went through the same thing. I read a book and it was mind body connection. I was like, damn, that makes sense. But no, there's something different about me. There's something like special that's not quite. And did you guys have that? I think that was my biggest limiting thing. I was like, there's something that they haven't tested for. There's something that they haven't found yet that's keeping me sick. Did you guys have that, like a similar kind of thing that you were like, there's something a little bit different?
I mean, I can relate to that. I can definitely relate to feeling that way and just kind of feeling like, well, no, I've been diagnosed with like this, and this. So it's these things. It's not dysregulation. Like, that doesn't make sense. So I totally get what you're saying.
What's your guys', because you guys, you talked about opening up detox pathways and doing a number of things before hitting on nervous system work. Do you think you can get better purely on nervous system work without doing all that other stuff? Or do you think it has to be like a hybrid of all of it?
I love that question. I think it's definitely a hybrid. I think you look at both of our journeys and you can see that it's been a hybrid and that nervous system work has been absolutely pivotal, but there is a time and a place for the physical healing work too. And that does often need to take place in these people who are dysregulated, because they are so much more prone to all of these physical issues. And I think more often than not, you do still need to address those physical issues, whatever they may be, whether it's gut issues, hormone imbalances, like your body needs that support as well. So I think we both see it as a two-pronged approach, but we definitely take a very nervous system informed approach to private practice. And of course, we've learned so much from our own journeys. So we are very conservative and strategic in regards to supplement recommendations. We never put a client on 50 things at one time. It's way too much for the body to process.
I think the nervous system piece of it is what holds your body back from the physical symptoms that you're addressing through other protocols to work. Like, if you haven't done the nervous system work and you're not addressing that big, huge piece of it, then no matter how many supplements you throw, no matter how much gut healing you do, no matter how much detox pathway optimization you do, you are not going to see the results that you would if it was also in line with a nervous system.
When we've done everything on the physical healing front, but there's still this roadblock and this issue, then it's like really time to dig into the nervous system conversation. And that is often the missing piece that then gets them over a big hump, if you will.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think again, when I was answering some of these like comments the other day of people saying it's nothing to do with the nervous system, doing like almost 150 episodes of this, pretty much I'd say 97% of like the episodes have nervous system stuff like work in it, and that just shows that it's so consistent in what shows up. How do you know with the different people that you're dealing with of what's likely to work for them? Someone maybe needs the rigidity of a Gupta program, someone needs the openness of working with animals. How do you find that out?
I mean, I think that's why we take a very open-minded approach when we recommend nervous system work. So we're never telling someone do Gupta. We're saying these are the different options that you could look at. you need to now dig into them, educate yourself, and see what's clicking with you, what's resonating with you. Because, and also, like, I don't want to discount the brain training programs. They've helped thousands of people. They didn't help me, they didn't help you, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to help someone else, a client of ours. So it's really about giving them the resources and the tools and saying, like, please look into these options and see what's like calling your name.
How important is belief in your like recovery, belief in that your life's going to get better? How important has that been in like this whole story? And how did you like cultivate that as time went on?
Oh yeah, that's a huge piece of it. There was a lot of dark chapters in this journey. I think where Delaney and I have had such a privilege was just having each other to get each other through those dark periods, because we were going through something that was so similar. We understood each other in a way that almost nobody else did. And so we're really lucky in that privilege is something that we know we had and most people don't have. But having the faith that you can get out of it is what will be the light to get you through it. And knowing that your life, like if this will change, you will find the thing that helps you get better. Even if you've tried 50 things in a row that haven't, you have to have the faith that the next thing you try is going to be it. And faith just looks different for everyone. So for some people, it's more spiritual. For some people, it's more religious. For some people, it's, relationships around them. Whatever it is, I think that's a missing piece of it as well to get you through it. But yeah, I mean, there was some dark moments in that journey for sure. And also, we have a lot of privilege regardless of our situations, but we were missing out on a lot. We were in our young 20s. We were in a chapter that we thought was going to be like the best time of our lives. We worked so hard to get these corporate jobs that we both ended up having to leave and go out on disability. And our friends were what we saw thriving, growing, accelerating in their careers. And we were sick and really miserable. And so we had to accept that too, that this was a chapter we were going through and that there had to be silver linings in it. Once we started to discover the silver linings, I think those were also the pieces that got us through.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we could go on about silver linings. There's a lot of them.
I would encourage anyone who's on a healing journey to like try and look for the silver linings, because they are there and they do exist, as hard as, whatever phase a person might be in. And then, the more healing that you gain, the more apparent the silver linings become. And honestly, like, even just to mention, like, some of them, obviously, like for us, what we do now, it's like changed, the path of our careers. And now we actually help people in such a fulfilling way with healing, with just spreading knowledge on Instagram and whatnot. But even just for my personal self, like, I think any physical healing journey at some point should force you to look inward at yourself, at your personality traits, at maybe things that might be holding you back. For me, like I said, like the perfectionism, like I used to pride myself on being a perfectionist. And now I'm like, I don't want anything to do with it. I like have really consciously disidentified from like being perfectionistic. And I've come so far with that. Like I really actually don't identify as a perfectionist anymore. And I've come to realize that was really hurting me more than it was helping me. So you learn so much about yourself.
Yeah.
And it ends up making you a better, stronger, more resilient person.
That's for sure. I think for anyone who's healing, like the easiest silver lining to grab onto that we grabbed onto early was the concept that you're learning so much that now you get to bring with you for the rest of your life. So you've now entered this space where you have all this education. You may have learned about supplements in a way that you never would have before. And now for the rest of your life, you're more aware, you have more education to be able to use them as tools moving forward. So if you're in the thick of healing and you're like, I can't see any silver linings, think to that.
That's a good one that I think applies to everyone.
Yeah, like how much more informed you are moving forward and how you can be your own doctor. Like it's not just going to medical school that gives you these tools. Like, no, there's a lot of research out there. There's a lot of access.
Yeah.
You can teach yourself things that you'll carry with you for the rest of your life.
And like most people who go through a journey like this, they do end up overhauling their lifestyle and adopting a way cleaner way of living, which is going to serve you for the rest of your life, like even once you've healed. So that I think always stood out to us even from the beginning.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about gratitude and what you said, silver linings. I think it's super, super important. And I had big shifts for me when I start to look at the sliding doors moment where, if you'd not got symptoms, then you'd have just gone down this path. And then I think I would have ended up loads sicker anyway, like if I'd continued down that path. I've said it a few times on the show before. I actually feel like, most people who are on the show are probably getting symptoms like before the age of 40. A lot of them like late 20s. That seems to be what I've seen a lot. And you do miss out on a lot, and you miss out on, things that you wished you didn't. But it means that when you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s, you're not going to have to deal with things that a lot of other people do. And that in itself is, unbelievable what you said then about having the knowledge that you guys have now, and applying that, I guess, that type A personality to your health. It just means that your health can go to another level. Do you see that? Is that something you try to get people to do when you're working with them, to just like have a look at all the ways in which their life is better?
Yeah, we always say that now we see this clearly, that chronic illness has been our greatest teacher. And I fully believe that. I think for both of us, the mold exposure was the trigger, but who's to say that there wouldn't have been another trigger 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line? There were so many, both personality traits and just, the positioning from the way we grew up, and certain tendencies that we had and belief systems that we've had to completely like break down and rethink. The way that we live our lives today wouldn't be the way that we would have lived our lives 5 years ago had we not gone through this. And I deeply, deeply believe that chronic illness was the greatest gift that I could have gotten in my life. And to think about that concept, I would have laughed at it had I told myself 5 years ago that that's the belief I carry now. Both of us.
Oh yeah.
It's the greatest gift.
It really is. And then one thing I'll add to that, just because I feel like I want to say this for your listeners specifically, one other shift we had like down the line a couple years into healing was looking at symptoms as our body's way of trying to communicate to us and speak with us. Whereas like the first couple years, we totally villainized symptoms. And I was like mad at my body. I was like pissed off. Like, why are you doing this to me? My body felt like it was like the enemy. And then like having that shift of like, oh, no. Like our bodies are so intelligent. Every symptom that it's giving us is a way of communicating and also like shedding light on what the potential root cause could be. And I think that mindset shift is huge because it allows you to also kind of like befriend your body, like look at it as your friend and someone you can partner with and work with to heal, as opposed to my body's punishing me, victimizing yourself, villainizing the symptoms.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. I think that like comes into, people seeing their bodies as like broken and weak. And that was something that was a big shift for me when I started to like see myself like as strong and like, I guess, capable and like, I've forgotten what it was. It was a program I was doing, and I just took a little bit from it where it was just like, you're so much more powerful than you ever even believe is possible. And I thought that just gaining that strength of mind and then strength of body, super, super powerful. Do you, in terms of like giving our listeners some hope based on your guys' experience? I think people like look at you guys now, listen to you now, and they go, okay, it's difficult to relate to that because you guys are so far, ahead now. But taking back to where you're at your darkest days, like what would you say to these guys right now who are at their lowest, can't see a way forward, can't believe in their recovery? What would you say to them to like keep moving on, keep going?
Such a good question.
That's a really good question. I like want to give you a killer answer.
So,
but
I know. And there's like so much.
I'd say, first of all, it's very fair to look at us today and to be like, oh, I can't relate to that. It's so far away from me. So for those people, I'd say go watch those highlights of ours that we can't even watch because they're so triggering.
We're so inflamed.
We're
and
so
happy
sick.
and
Yeah.
it's like
we were there, and you can go and watch that, and then hopefully that will inspire you that you can get here. I think we had a lot of things we would have done differently. That's a lot of that we shared with you already. Take the shortcuts if you can. Do the hard work of nervous system healing, even when you don't think and you think it's a joke, you don't think it's going to help you. But in terms of motivation, I think it's really just you have to grab onto that belief that this is a chapter of your life and you don't know how long it's going to be. But the sooner you drop the expectations of the timelines, the sooner you're going to heal. And that was probably the thing that held us back the most in the beginning. It's how we started this whole conversation was we had the pressure of timelines because we thought that would get us better. And it was the biggest obstacle. So keep going, believe you will get better, and drop the dates and the timelines by which you have to get better to let your body have the freedom and flexibility to go on its own pace.
Yeah. I mean, that was beautifully said. I agree with everything. I think one other thing I would say is the most aggressive path is not necessarily the best path, and actually going low and slow is most likely going to better serve most people. I think when you first get sick, there's such an eagerness to get better as quickly as possible, but that ends up like kind of hurting you in the end. So it kind of just connects to what you were just saying. But I just say be really gentle with yourself. Like, don't overload your body with too many supplements and too many treatments. It's like your body can only handle so much at one time.
I think one thing we didn't touch on that I kind of, you can relate to the answer to this question is be aware that chronic illness is a business, and don't give up all your power to doctors or practitioners who promise you things. Those things being healing. I would go back and say that any practitioner who gave me an answer to the timeline question, I probably should have questioned a little bit more because they don't know. And I know a lot of us are just so desperate, so we'll try anything, but don't be so quick to turn over money for something until you have done the research on the people that have actually gotten better from it, and or you're willing to lose that money and not have any problems. Because more often than not, the things that were the most expensive were not the things that worked.
So true. So true. I saw someone commenting the other day about that. And I think people say this a lot, like, oh, it's okay for such and such because, they've got this money to throw at things. And often it's the things that don't cost any money or very little money that make the most difference. It definitely has for me. And that says a lot. I think the timeline thing is really, really important. And I'm glad you said it. It's definitely super important for me. I always used to put timelines on things, and that in itself shows you're kind of like really not living in the moment. You're not enjoying your life right at that point. And I know people listen to this thinking, how is it possible to enjoy your life? But when I was Primal Trust, I started doing that, and it was all about trying to find like joy in each of your days. And that in itself means that it doesn't matter what's going to happen in the future. Like, I just need to find a way of enjoying today. And I think that was like a big piece for me, like of being able to still live a life whilst going through this. Did you guys have that as well, where at one point it was just waiting for a point in the future where you were going to be happy and healthy, and then at some point you realized, oh, I can still be kind of happy-ish, then happy, whilst you're going through it?
For sure. I mean, we both really fell into the timeline trap for several years, and I definitely put my life on pause and said no to a lot of things because I was just like, I can't right now. And then I would say there was X event 6 months from now, I'd be like, okay, but I'm going to be better by X event in 6 months from now. So like, it's fine. But then that put so much pressure on my healing and on my body. So if 2 months before that event, I was still super thick. I was like freaking out, which then completely dysregulated me even more and threw me into a flare up. And then, so it's like, it's a horrible cycle, the timeline thing. And yeah, we were totally guilty of that.
I think for me too, I found something, and it's truly a gift for the rest of my life, but I found something that brought me joy that changed every single day for me and gave me fulfillment and purpose. And that for me was getting back into horses, and so much so that I'm like extremely competitive in riding now. And the horses gave me joy that nothing else was in the moment. And I think if you find something that can bring you that joy that you can look forward to every single day, your life is going to transform. So whether that be a sport, a passion, going to the beach if you have access, like find something that sparks that joy within you and then keep doing it and finding other things. And then you'll be able to focus on the things that bring you happiness every day. I also think there's something to be said about finding a passion that brings you fulfillment. The people in life that have the most fulfillment every single day and aren't just looking future facing for their fulfillment, I think are the happiest people. And so if you can find, whether it's a sport, something competitive, or something that you want to get better at, and you become an expert on that thing, just find something that you're forced to grow at. Like when we're kids, it's so easy for that to be a sport. And we don't realize the amount of fulfillment that comes with playing a sport competitively. It doesn't need to be that, but find something that forces you to grow every single day and think about the joy that that thing brings you.
Awesome. Guys, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your story and your wisdom. Really appreciate it. And if people wanted to reach out, to ask you any more questions, like how would they best do that?
Our Instagram is the Detoxing Duo, and our email is linked there. So you can send us a DM, you can send us an email.
Follow us online. Yeah. Instagram, TikTok, all the things. We're pretty easy to access.
Yeah, no, you guys putting out like a lot of like really useful like free information on your Instagram. So yeah, guys, go and check them out, regardless of whether you're going to send them a message anyway. So guys, really appreciate it. Once again, so glad we got a chance to do this, and you guys managed to pack 2 stories in one. So yeah, amazing. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you
much
for having us, and thank you for doing what you do, because you're helping a ton of people.